Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you. Female CEO mocked the janitor. His real secret left her speechless. The glass tower of Sterling Aviation gleamed against the Manhattan skyline like a monument to untouchable wealth. Inside the 52nd floor executive suite, Victoria Sterling stood at the window, champagne flute in hand, surrounded by shareholders and admirers celebrating her company's newest acquisition. At 34, she'd built an empire, and she wanted everyone to know it. That's the difference between people like us and people like them, she said, gesturing toward the hallway where a figure in navy coveralls pushed a cleaning cart. Her laugh was sharp, crystalline. We fly. They mop. The janitor paused near the doorway, his face hidden beneath a worn baseball cap, shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear into the walls. Victoria noticed him and felt a wicked impulse rise. You, she called out, her voice cutting through the champagne-soaked chatter. Come here. The room fell silent. The janitor's hand stilled on the cart handle. I said, come here. Victoria's smile widened. She loved an audience. He shuffled forward, keeping his eyes down. Up close, she noticed the scars on his hands. Old burns, maybe, or something worse. His uniform was faded but clean, and there was something about the way he carried himself, a strange stillness that irritated her. What's your name? Cole, ma'am. Cole. She tasted the name like something sour. Tell me, Cole, have you ever flown anything in your sad little life? A plane, a helicopter? Her guests tittered. Or is pushing a mop the highest you've ever soared? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Because I have a proposal for you. Victoria walked to the mahogany table and picked up a photograph of her custom Bell 407 helicopter, parked on the rooftop helipad. Fly this helicopter just once around the building, and I'll marry you. Imagine that. A janitor married to a billionaire. She pressed the photo against his chest. But when you can't even start the engine, I want you to remember your place. The room erupted in laughter. Cole's fingers closed around the photograph. For just a moment, he looked up, and Victoria caught something in his eyes. Not anger, not humiliation, but something far more unsettling. Recognition, pity. Tomorrow morning, she continued, drunk on her own cruelty. 8 a.m. sharp, the whole company will watch you fail. He nodded once, turned and walked away, leaving his cleaning cart behind. Victoria didn't know it yet, but she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. And by tomorrow morning, everything she thought she knew about power, respect, and the man in the navy coveralls would shatter like the champagne glass slipping from her suddenly trembling hand. Cole Matheson hadn't slept in his apartment that night. He never really slept anymore, not since Kandahar, not since the crash that had killed his entire crew and left him with burns covering 40% of his body and a medical discharge that felt more like a death sentence than freedom. Instead, he sat on the rooftop of his modest Queens apartment building, watching the city lights blur through the PTSD haze that had become his constant companion. In his pocket, the photograph Victoria had given him was folded into a small square. He didn't need to look at it. He knew that helicopter intimately. Every dial, every gauge, every system. The Bell 407 was a beautiful machine, reliable and forgiving. He'd flown dozens of them in another life, before his hands had started shaking, before the nightmares had made him afraid of his own reflection. Daddy? The small voice behind him made him turn. His daughter Emma stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her 7-year-old face creased with worry. Hey, baby girl, he said softly, opening his arms. She ran to him and he held her against his chest, feeling her heartbeat against his scars. Bad dream? You weren't in bed, I know. I'm sorry. Emma pulled back and looked at him with eyes too old for her age, eyes that had seen her mother leave when the medical bills got too high, when Cole's flashbacks had become too frightening, when the war had finally come home for good. Are you sad again? No, sweetheart. Just thinking. About the mean lady? Cole had told Emma about the incident, softening it into a story about a woman who didn't understand that everyone has value, regardless of their job. But Emma was sharp, sharper than he gave her credit for. She doesn't know you're a hero, Emma said, her small hand touching the scars on his arm. She doesn't know you saved people. But I didn't save enough, Cole thought. I didn't save the ones who mattered most. Sometimes, he said carefully, people need to learn lessons. And sometimes we're the ones who have to teach them, even when it's hard. Are you going to fly tomorrow? The question hung between them like a live wire. Cole had sworn he'd never fly again. Not after the panic attacks that had left him hyperventilating in parking lots. Not after the therapist had gently suggested that maybe some things were better left in the past. But there was something in Victoria Sterling's eyes yesterday. Something beyond cruelty. There was emptiness, loneliness. A woman who'd built walls so high she couldn't see the prison she'd created. And there was Emma, looking at him with hope and belief that he'd stopped believing he deserved. Yeah, baby, he whispered, pulling her close. I'm going to fly. What neither of them knew was that on the other side of the city, Victoria Sterling was standing at her own window, unable to sleep. The janitor's face haunting her in ways she couldn't explain. And by morning, the challenge she'd issued as a joke would become the moment that changed everything. The rooftop of Sterling Aviation headquarters was packed by 7:45 a.m. Word had spread through the building like wildfire. The CEO was going to humiliate a janitor in front of the entire company. Some employees came out of loyalty, others out of morbid curiosity. But most came because Victoria Sterling's cruelty had become legendary, and they wanted to see if someone would finally stand up to her. Victoria arrived in a white pantsuit, perfectly pressed, her confidence radiating like armor. She'd barely slept, plagued by strange dreams of helicopters falling from the sky and scarred hands reaching for her through smoke. Ridiculous. She shook off the unease and climbed the platform her assistant had erected. Complete with microphone and cameras, this would make excellent content for the company's social media, a reminder of who held the power. But when 8 a.m. arrived, Cole Matheson wasn't there. Victoria's smile faltered. Had he chickened out? Was he that pathetic? Then at 8:03, the rooftop door opened. Cole walked out, but he wasn't wearing his janitor uniform. Instead, he wore dark jeans, a simple white shirt, and a leather jacket that had seen better days. His baseball cap was gone, revealing close-cropped dark hair threaded with silver, and a face that, despite its scars, was striking in its quiet intensity. He carried a worn flight bag over his shoulder. The crowd murmured. Something was different. Something was wrong, or very, very right. Victoria's heart did a strange skip as he approached. Up close, without the hunched shoulders and downcast eyes, he looked nothing like the janitor she'd mocked. He looked like someone who'd walked through fire and survived. Someone who'd seen things she couldn't imagine. I'm here, Cole said simply. So I see. Victoria's voice was sharp, but there was a tremor underneath. Ready to embarrass yourself? Ready to fly. He walked past her toward the Bell 407, and that's when Victoria noticed the small girl being led onto the rooftop by an elderly woman. Cole's daughter, she realized with a jolt. The child's face was lit with pride and fear in equal measure. Cole circled the helicopter with professional efficiency, running his hands along the fuselage, checking the tail rotor, peering into the engine compartment. His movements were practiced, automatic. Victoria felt the first real flutter of doubt. You're just stalling, she called out. But her voice lacked conviction. Cole didn't respond. He opened the pilot's door, threw his bag inside, and climbed in. Through the cockpit window, Victoria watched him settle into the seat, his hands moving across the instruments with the kind of familiarity that comes from thousands of hours in the air. The engine started with a powerful whine. The crowd gasped. Victoria's champagne smile crumbled as the rotor blades began to turn. Slowly at first, then faster. The downwash whipping her perfectly styled hair into chaos. Cole's hands moved across the controls, confident, steady, sure. There was no hesitation, no fumbling. This wasn't a janitor pretending to fly. This was a pilot coming home. The helicopter lifted off the pad with textbook precision, rising smoothly into the Manhattan morning. And as Victoria watched it bank gracefully around the building, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, genuine, bone-deep shock, and the terrifying realization that she'd just challenged someone who'd been playing far below his level, for reasons she couldn't begin to understand. The helicopter touched down 12 minutes later, with the kind of perfect landing that comes from years of training and natural skill. The rooftop had gone completely silent. Victoria stood frozen on her platform, watching Cole shut down the systems with professional calm, his hands steady on controls she'd assumed he'd never touched before. When he finally climbed out, he didn't look at her. Instead, he walked straight to Emma, who broke free from the elderly woman's grip and ran into his arms, her small body shaking with relief and pride. Cole lifted her, holding her tight, whispering something Victoria couldn't hear. Who are you? Victoria's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. Cole set Emma down gently and finally turned to face her. The morning sun caught his scars, making them look like a map of battles she'd never fought. Captain Cole Matheson, formerly of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Night Stalkers, 15 years of service, 4 tours, 3,000 hours in combat zones. His voice was quiet, but carried across the silent rooftop. I flew Black Hawks, Chinooks, and Little Birds in places you've never heard of, doing things you'll never know about. The crowd erupted in whispers. Victoria felt her legs weaken. I crashed 18 months ago, Cole continued, his eyes never leaving hers. Lost my entire crew. Spent 8 months in the burn unit. Got medically discharged with PTSD, chronic pain, and hands that shake when I sleep. I came back to a wife who couldn't handle the nightmares, medical bills that buried me, and a daughter who needed to eat. He took a step closer, and Victoria found she couldn't move. Sterling Aviation was hiring janitors. Night shift. I could work when Emma was sleeping, be there when she woke up. I could push a mop without anyone asking questions, without anyone thanking me for my service, without anyone looking at my scars and deciding I was broken. I didn't, Victoria started. You didn't know, Cole interrupted, his voice harder now. You didn't ask. You saw a janitor and decided you knew everything about me. You saw someone beneath you and thought that gave you the right to humiliate him in front of an audience. Shame, hot and unfamiliar, flooded Victoria's chest. Around them, her employees were staring at her with something she'd never seen before. Disappointment. Disapproval. The funny thing is, Cole said, and now his voice softened with something that might have been pity. I wasn't even angry yesterday. I was sad. Sad that someone with all your success, all your power, all your privilege, was still so desperately empty that you needed to hurt someone just to feel big. Victoria's eyes burned. She wanted to defend herself, to lash out, to do anything but stand there and feel the truth of his words cutting through every defense she'd ever built. So here's what's going to happen, Cole said, pulling something from his jacket pocket, the marriage joke photograph now worn from his handling. I kept my end of the bargain. I flew your helicopter, but I don't want to marry you, Ms. Sterling. I want you to remember this moment. Remember what it feels like to be wrong, to be humbled, to realize that the people you look down on might be the ones who've accomplished more than you ever will. Cole turned to leave, taking Emma's hand, but Victoria's voice stopped him. Wait, the word came out broken, desperate. She stepped down from her platform, her designer heels clicking on the concrete, until she stood directly in front of him. Up close, she could see the pain etched into his features, the exhaustion of a man who'd been carrying weight she couldn't imagine. You're right, she said, and the admission cost her everything. About all of it. I've spent so long building walls, proving I was untouchable, that I forgot. Her voice cracked. I forgot how to see people. Real people. Cole studied her face, and she had the sense of being truly seen for the first time in years. Not Victoria Sterling, billionaire CEO, just Victoria, lost and lonely and desperate for something she couldn't buy. I can't undo what I said, she continued, tears threatening now. But I want to do something for you. For Emma, let me help with the medical bills. Let me set up a fund for her education. No, the word was gentle but firm. Cole shook his head. I don't want your money, Ms. Sterling. That's not what this was about. Then what? What can I do? He was quiet for a long moment, looking at his daughter, then back at Victoria. You can do better. For your employees, for the people who clean your offices and serve your coffee and hold the doors. You can see them, really see them, and maybe, he hesitated, maybe you can remember that success isn't measured in what you have, but in how you treat the people who can't give you anything in return. Something in Victoria's chest cracked open, years of armor falling away. I don't know how to do that, I don't know how to be better. Then learn. Cole's expression softened slightly. It's not too late. It's never too late. He turned again, but this time Victoria didn't call him back. She watched him and Emma walk toward the rooftop door. Two figures against the morning sky, a war hero and his daughter, both carrying scars, both still standing. As they reached the door, Emma looked back and waved, a small gesture that somehow hurt more than all of Cole's words combined. 2 months later, the changes at Sterling Aviation were subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Salary increases for all support staff, full health benefits, scholarship programs. Victoria Sterling, once known for her cruelty, became known for something else: showing up. Learning names, listening to stories. The Ice Queen was melting, and her employees didn't quite know what to make of it. Cole had moved on to a consulting position at a veterans rehabilitation center, using his experience to help other soldiers transition back to civilian life. He and Emma were building something new, something better. He never saw Victoria again in person, but sometimes, late at night, he'd get text messages from an unknown number. "Thank you for teaching me how to fly," he never responded. He didn't need to, because sometimes heroes don't wear medals anymore. Sometimes they just show up, do the hard thing, and remind us that real strength isn't about power or wealth or status. Real strength is about standing up when it would be easier to stay down. About protecting your daughter's dreams while holding together your own shattered pieces. About giving grace to people who don't deserve it. Because maybe, just maybe, that grace is what finally helps them learn to fly. And in the end, the most powerful thing Cole Matheson had given Victoria Sterling wasn't humiliation or revenge. It was a second chance to become the person she'd forgotten she could be. Sometimes, the people we look down on are the ones standing on higher ground. We just can't see it through our own shadows.